In a warm, shallow sea, hundreds of millions of years ago, a tiny creature goes still against the very bottom. It has no bones, no hands, no voice. But it already carries the thing that will one day upend the whole planet. A speck of light-sensitive cells that can tell light from shadow. A dark silhouette passes over it, the water cools for an instant, and that speck catches the change. The creature jerks aside, and lives one more day. There is nothing like a thought here. There is only a signal, a response, and a tiny knot of nerves that ties the one to the other. But right here, in this dark water, begins the story of the most expensive and the strangest organ life has ever built. The very one with which you are hearing these words right now. We are used to telling the story of the big brain as a triumph. Our peak, our pride, the organ that lifted us above the animals and let us build cities and send our voice across the sky. It is a beautiful version. And it hides the main thing. How strange, how expensive, and how nearly ruinous the whole road was. Your big brain is not a prize simply handed to you. It is a bet your ancestors paid for unthinkably long, with new senses, new dangers, hunger, and an endlessly long childhood. And here is what is worth keeping in mind while you listen to this with the very organ we are talking about. That bet has not ended. It is running inside your skull right now, and it still charges you every single day. To understand why the brain became so big, you cannot start with a person at a desk. You have to rewind, past the first cities, past the first fires, past the savanna, all the way back to the most ancient sea, where our ancestors had no hands, no face, no name yet. And take two questions with you. What could have been so important that it was worth building an organ this expensive and this dangerous? And why, once it had grown, did it never shrink again, even though it charges you to this day? Start where it all began, in the ancient sea. The first creatures did not need a big brain because the world around them was simple, light and dark, warm and cold, edible and dangerous. But the world did not stand still. Those who hunt and those who are hunted appeared, and suddenly it mattered to notice more, to spot the shadow before it turned into a mouth, to hear movement in murky water, to tell where the prey was and where the stone. And the body began to answer this challenge with new senses. Eyes appeared, not just pale patches, but real eyes, able to assemble a picture out of light. Hearing appeared, catching the trembling of the water. Smell, taste, the sense of touch appeared. But here's the trick. A sense is useless on its own. An eye that sees is worth nothing if there is no one to tie what is seen to a decision. Run or freeze, swallow or spit out. Every new sense demanded something that would gather all the signals together and turn them into an act. And that something grew at the front end of the body, closest to the eyes and the mouth. A knot of nerves that processed the flood and made the decisions. The first sketch of a brain. The richer the world of the senses became, the more work landed on this knot, and the larger it grew. And here a race began that would never end. The moment one creature could see a little farther, hunting it grew harder, and the predators that saw even better survived. The moment a predator grew sharper-eyed, only the prey that noticed it first escaped. Every improvement of the senses in one pushed forward the senses in another, and every new sense added work to that same knot of nerves. The world stopped being a simple set of light and dark. It became a stream that had to be read, and read faster than your neighbor. And then came one of the boldest steps in the history of life, the move onto land. Imagine how alien and dangerous this new world was for a creature born in water. In the sea, the water held the body up. On land, weight suddenly became real, and every movement had to be built anew. In water, sound and smell spread softly. In air, everything is different. Light is sharper, distances are longer, and the horizon suddenly opens far ahead. The world became far more complex and far richer in things that had to be noticed and calculated. A predator is visible from far off, but so are you. You have to judge the distance, lay out the path, remember where the shelter is and where the trap. Land was an exam the sea never set. And this exam, again and again, rewarded those who could process more and decide faster. The brain did not grow because being smart is pleasant. It grew because the world turned, over and over, into a problem that could not be solved by strength alone. Notice that it was no longer only about feeling more, but about remembering longer and looking farther ahead. On land, prey and danger appeared and vanished, leaving tracks, smells, flattened grass. Whoever could reconstruct the whole from the scraps, where the herd had gone, where the predator was hiding, when the water would return, gained a tiny advantage. And that advantage, repeated thousands of times over thousands of generations, slowly shaped a head able not just to see the world, but to build it in the mind. Fast forward further still, into hot and harsh Africa, to small, upright apes with a brain a little bigger than a chimpanzee's. The world again refused to stand still. The climate swung. Wet ages gave way to dry ones. Forests broke apart into scraps of groves and open grass. Food that was reliable in one generation vanished in the next. You could not simply know where the fruit trees grew, because the trees died, shifted, changed with the rains. And survival once more rewarded not muscle, but the one who could figure things out. Whoever remembered where the water had been 2 droughts ago, whoever read the behavior of the herd, whoever invented a new food when the old one ran out, lived a little longer and left a few more children. In that world, there were no storehouses, no maps, no memory except the kind that lived in living heads. An old one who remembered a distant watering hole from a drought half a century back was worth more than the strongest young hunter. Knowledge became survival, and a head able to hold more of it and reason with it quietly gained the advantage, one hard drought at a time. Stand in that world for a moment, because it was merciless in a way ours no longer is. A single bad drought could empty an entire valley, stripping it of all the animals and plants the group depended on. There were no reserves, no second chance. The savanna did not select for the biggest muscles. It selected for the deepest memory and the fastest wit. But there was one more press driving the brain upward: one's own kind. In a group, it is not enough merely to survive. You have to be no worse than the others. You have to find a mate, which means being a little more noticeable, a little more resourceful, a little more appealing than your rival. You have to reach a higher place, because on it depend food, safety, and offspring. And suddenly the main problem was not a stone or a root, but another mind. Who is a rival and who an ally? Who will share and who will cheat? How to be liked, how to persuade, how to outmaneuver the one who wants the same thing you do. Competition for a mate and for a place in the group did not forgive dullness. Whoever read others' intentions better and presented themselves better won more often, and more often left children to whom they passed the same sharpness of mind. So one's own kind became for one another an endless exam that can never be passed once and for all. And yet the big brain keeps a merciless account. And this is where the real story begins. Brain tissue is incredibly expensive. It burns energy at a furious rate, far more per gram than muscle or bone, and it never rests, not even in sleep. A small ape chewing tough leaves and hard roots could never have paid for a growing brain. Picture a gorilla. It spends almost its whole life chewing, hour after hour grinding through mountains of foliage just to scrape together enough energy for a modest brain and an enormous gut. The ceiling on intelligence was not in the head, it was on the plate. And here is what changed. The ancestors reached for richer food. They began to eat meat. At first, scavenged from others' kills, cracking bones for the fatty marrow the others could not reach. Rich food means more energy in every bite and fewer hours given to the jaw. And then came a quiet revolution. The ancestors tamed fire and began to cook. Meat that had once been torn for hours with the teeth now became soft. Hard roots, nearly inedible raw, turned sweet in the coals. Fire, in a way, digested the food in advance, before it was even eaten. Teeth could shrink, the jaw could relax, and the gut could shorten, because part of the work of digestion now happened outside, in the heat of the flame. Picture the first fires on that ancient land, and the change they worked in the bodies of those who gathered around them. Fire did not merely warm, it fed the brain, forcing food to give up its energy without a fight. And the energy freed up by a shorter gut seemed to flow upward, into the skull. Your ancestors did not simply grow a big brain. They paid for it by giving up the belly of a leaf eater. And the body did something that gives away the whole nature of the deal. A big, greedy gut is needed only to process mountains of poor food. Give the body richer fuel, and that expensive tube can be surrendered. It is no accident that these two changes went hand in hand. The shorter the gut became, the more energy was left over for the thing growing in the skull. And here the story reaches all the way to your own body, because you live inside the very same deal. Your brain, a tiny fraction of your weight, quietly eats about 1/5 of all the energy you spend, even when you are just sitting and doing nothing. And you feel this price every time you go hungry. Thinking is the first thing to falter, attention dims, mood darkens, because the brain does not tolerate hunger. It stands first in line for every scrap of fuel, and when there is little, it makes itself known before almost any other organ. You carry inside you a passenger who has to be fed before all the rest. And this is neither a malfunction nor a luxury. It is the condition of the very deal your ancestors struck, rebuilding their entire diet for the sake of one single organ. But now the real riddle arises. If a big brain is so expensive, why did evolution not find a cheaper answer? Why not a smaller, safer brain, just clever enough? Something kept pushing the size upward, past the point of comfort. To understand it, you have to think like a detective. Lay out the suspects. The first thought, a bigger brain made better tools, and tools gave more food, and the circle closed on itself. There is truth in this, but not enough. Plenty of animals use tools, and their skulls do not swell. It is also worth killing a tempting myth, that the size of the brain by itself is the measure of intelligence. There are beasts larger than us with bigger brains that do nothing like our deeds. There are small heads that are astonishingly clever. It was not about raw size, but about which part of the brain is given over to the slow and expensive work, reasoning, planning, and reading other minds. But the deepest suspect is, once again, others. Our ancestors lived in groups, and in a group, the hardest problem is not a stone or a root, but another mind. To hold dozens of relationships at once, to remember debts and grudges, to imagine what another is thinking, and to calculate moves ahead. Neither a root nor a predator demanded such a thing, only people. Picture a problem that truly stretched the ancient mind. Not a stone that needs shaping, but a scene like this. A hunter has come back with meat and must decide whom to share it with, knowing that today's gift buys tomorrow's favor, that a forgotten slight could cost a life in the hungry season, and that a rival is watching to see whether they will look weak. To succeed in such a web, the mind held dozens of ties at once and calculated moves several steps ahead. And in that lies the whole answer. The acceleration was most likely driven by life side by side itself. Every step forward in cleverness raised the bar for everyone else, and this spiral had no ceiling. To keep up among clever allies and clever rivals, you had to become a little smarter. And so did your children, and theirs. The brain was no longer chasing the outside world. It was chasing itself, generation after generation. And here everything comes to a head. The brain grew so stubbornly that it became almost too big to be born easily. Yes, human birth is hard, and this truly cost our species dearly. But the most astonishing thing is not the danger, but the answer evolution found to it. If the head cannot grow any larger before birth, then the brain has to grow afterward, outside, in the open world. That is why humans are born as if too early, helpless in a way almost no other newborn is. A human infant cannot walk, cannot cling, cannot feed itself, and its brain keeps growing for years. A foal drops to the ground and stands within an hour. An ape's baby is born with an almost finished head and grabs its mother's fur at once. And only the human child comes into the world unfinished, on purpose. But it is in this helplessness that the deepest benefit is hidden. A brain that grows on the outside is shaped by the world it grows in, rather than sealed by instinct before birth. These helpless years are the time when a person soaks up language, skills, knowledge, the whole inherited culture of their people. The very slowness that makes the child so vulnerable is what makes it so teachable. Other animals are born almost complete, ready to run within an hour, and remain locked in the abilities they were born with. The human child arrives open, like a blank page waiting to be filled by its own time and place. The long childhood was the price, and it was also the greatest prize. And this is exactly where the part you liked is hidden. We do not hand our children ready answers in the blood, like an ant or a spider. We bring them into the world almost empty and spend years filling them with words, habits, skills, stories. And that is precisely why one person can become a hunter, another a healer, a third the one who reads the stars. One and the same brain, shaped by different teaching. And a helpless child, who will not survive alone for over 10 years, requires a whole group ready to feed it, protect it, and above all, teach it. The same brain that made us so hard to give birth to also made us dependent on one another. It bound us into families and tribes that together carry the unthinkable cost of raising a human. We do not simply give birth to children. We spend years passing on to them everything we have learned ourselves. Step back and feel the whole arc at once. We began with a tiny creature in the ancient sea, which had only a speck telling light from shadow. We watched eyes and hearing be born, watched the move onto land set a new exam, watched the swinging savanna reward mind over muscle, watched competition for a mate and a place drive the brain upward, watched meat and fire pay the bill, and watched life among one's own spin a spiral with no ceiling. The very organ that grew through all these deals is the one with which you are following this sentence right now. And this is why it never shrank again. Once all of human life had been built around the big brain, around tools, language, alliances, and shared knowledge, there was no way back. A creature that shrank its brain would have lost the very abilities its world now demanded. The brain became a load-bearing wall, woven so deeply into how we live that pull out any part of it and the whole building collapses. It stayed not because it was cheap, but because by the time it was ready, we could no longer survive without it. So the next time you solve a problem, hold a complex thought in your mind, or simply recognize a face in a crowd, remember what this organ really is. Not a gift and not a crown, but the outcome of a long and expensive bet paid by your ancestors. With new senses, hunger, danger, and helplessness, and still running, still hungry, still grown under the pressure of a vanished world, right there inside your skull. And if this thought lingers in you even a little, stay with me. Your body is full of such ancient deals that are still being paid today. And behind each one stands a story as old and as alive as this one.